I've still got a little bit of a croak in my voice, Karina. So if you see me continually sort of muting myself and coughing, that's what's going on. I'm going to do it right now. Here I go.
Okay. Hello, Mara.
Oh, hang on. Oh, I am on. I'm not on mute. Hello, Karina. How are you?
Good. How are you? Is that the correct pronunciation, Mara?
It is. Yes. Yes, it is, Mara. Yep.
Hello, Mara. How are you?
I am good, thanks, Tom. How are you going? Hang on, I'll put my camera on. You may not remember me at all.
Well, no. The name is super familiar, and it's a
yeah.
beautiful photo that you have up there. But can you help me? Can you just help jog my memory?
Yes. Doesn't look quite like that, but yes, I'm away on holidays at the moment. No, I did the AYA training with you back in 2015, I think it was.
Okay, all right. Well,
So ages ago.
Please excuse me. It is ages ago, and a lot has happened. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Because I know that you're. Have you moved to Phillip Island?
Yeah.
Is that where you've moved?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm on the island living the dream. It's one of the things I'm super grateful for in the last couple of years. It was always on the cards for us, but the old COVID situation sort of just gave us the push that we needed, and here we are.
Yep, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
And how have you been? Have you been well?
Most of the time, yes. Had a little bit of a. We had, the whole COVID thing. We had a bit of a health scare. Hang on, big health scare last year, let's say. But so it's made me relook at things because I'm a psychologist. I work in a school. That's one of the reasons I was doing the yoga teacher training. And so I'm back there now, but it's just ridiculous hours, etc., etc. So I'll finish it at the end of the year, and then we'll see what I do.
Oh, beautiful! A new chapter.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
where are you living?
In Croydon.
Okay.
But we have a place down at Phillip Island as well, and we've often played with the idea of, would we go down there and live?
Whereabouts?
Oh, it's in Beach Street in Cowes.
Okay,
So,
amazing.
Yeah. So where are you? Silverleaves or somewhere like that?
Yeah, we're in Silverleaves. Oh, let me know next time you're down. We'll catch up for a coffee.
Oh, it'd be lovely. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be fantastic. And you're being well?
Yeah, really well, thank you. It's lots of big changes, but all positive, and was just talking to the gorgeous Karina before. It's been a big year, and I'm looking forward to having a nice wind down over summer. So yeah. Very good. And when Maro, so you would have had Karina lecturing you for the yin portion of your training if it was 2015 or not, Karina?
I don't think so, Karina.
We might have just missed each other. I think I started in I think it was late 2015, early 2016, and I was doing lateral flexion and twists, and then I didn't do yin until Mark wasn't doing yin anymore, which I think might have been 2017.
Okay.
Yeah. But I certainly knew of you, Karina, because of the yin training that you do, and the classes that you teach. So.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Am I the only live member?
Well, Dominique and I both just had a funny chat about how we both schedule things on eventful days and don't even think about it. It's just not in
Grand
our
final day.
Yeah. So it might be that we will just be sharing this with 20 odd people that want to watch the replay, which is totally fine. Or we might have a few people that trail in late, which always happens as well. Yeah,
that's very true. I'm actually away at the moment. So I'm in beautiful, sunny Port Douglas. I'm feeling so grateful. It's so warm. It's magnificent. So I don't know if my data, because the Wi-Fi up here is hopeless because there's so many people up here. It's just not working well. So I'm using data at the minute. It may cut out, which is why I didn't have the video on.
Okay. Well, Murray, if you feel at any stage like you need to turn your camera off, then do what you need to do to maintain your G's, and yeah, see how you go. But it's also school holidays as well, which I'm terrible. You'd think I'd be more together with school holidays, but yeah, I'm also just hopeless at just planning things and plotting things. And anyway,
it was funny, I must admit, when I saw the date and I thought, oh, okay, and you're Victorians, hang on.
We're Victorians, but we're not necessarily football. I'm not a football person at all. Say football things to me, I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. So thanks for coming, and thanks for joining us while you're on vacation. That's very sweet of you. And a nice big warm welcome to you and anyone that's about to join, or anyone that's watching this after the fact that might have been watching the football instead of this. Today's conversation is really inspired by little conversations that Dominique and I have been having, and conversations that we've been having with our students that we've been mentoring and fellow teachers that we've been connecting with. And it's a big topic, and it's a topic we would have loved to have more people here to chime in, and they could be on their way, because I feel like everyone's got something to say about this, and everyone's got a personal reflection about it. And it's done lots of pendulum swings, I think, through the history of yoga, and its touch in the yoga classroom, in the yoga space, and giving adjustments, receiving adjustments, also just reflecting that in these COVID times, touch has got a whole different kind of layer to it as well. And Dominique has incredible skills in hands-on adjusting, has done a lot of training with that, is well known actually in the yoga community for giving adjustments and teaching adjustments well. And I'm more kind of in the yin part of the yogaverse now, where hands-on adjustments is just really different in a yin space, and adjusting isn't quite the way that it is in a vinyasa class. So yeah, we have had lots of really good conversations. And if you're just rewatching this, we hope that this sparks a lot of thought for you, or a lot of inquiry for yourself about what comes up for you when you're a student in a yoga shala, and what comes up for you as a teacher if you are someone who's really inspired to give adjustments. The other thing that we really noticed is that there's so many people coming out of all sorts of professions right now that did a big chunk, if not all, of their training in a digital way, whether that's GPs or acupuncturists or physios or yoga teachers. We've had the privilege of having conversation with a lot of yoga teachers that did majority of their training on Zoom, and they're feeling quite bereft of the opportunity to actually practice hands-on adjusting. And the group that we've just been working with now, that was like hands down one of the things that people really wanted to practice or learn a bit more was adjustments. And they really, really loved it, even though I've said to a couple of people, oh, we did some adjusting. People are like, oh, are people doing that? I didn't think anyone was giving adjustments anymore because of COVID. And I was like, well, maybe, but also people are really hungry to learn it. And everybody in the room that was there loved it. So when people say, oh, I don't think we're adjusting anymore, and I think Dominique can speak to this a little bit more than I can because she's in those classes, there is still a craving for that, and there is still a want for that. So yeah. What are you noticing in the classes that you're teaching? You're teaching in studio now, aren't you?
I am, and it's so nice to be back in studio. Oh my goodness. In fact, I found that the students are actually hungrier for adjustments now than they were before. It's really surprising to me, because part of me had expected that there would be a lot of sort of nervousness or reticence around touch, especially given what everyone's gone through in the last 2 years. But my experience here has been the opposite. People are absolutely craving and receptive, and asking for that, and it's really great. And I feel like, and look, I feel like I'm only just coming back into in-studio teaching, even though I've, been back in since, when was it, July. Part of me still feels like I'm easing back into that role, and I'm also cognizant of the fact that the classes that I'm teaching here in and around Phillip Island, maybe the students here have got a slightly different mindset. So my feeling is that there's going to be a little bit of a schism. And there's going to be those students that are understandably still feeling very nervous around just being back in a studio setting, because there's been a lot of fear in the last couple of years, and fear does strange things to people. So there are still those people that are maybe nervous to come back into studio full stop, which of course is a group that is, this conversation doesn't necessarily apply to. Then there's a group that are back in studio who, as I say, might be understandably nervous about touch. And for me, I can see those students a mile away, because they're the ones who've still got their masks on indoors and in the class. And then there's this other group, which I feel really fortunate that I've seemed to be making up the mainstay of my classes at the moment, that are just so super hungry for touch and so grateful to receive that kind of attention. So I feel like the landscape has fundamentally shifted in the yogaverse. I'm still getting a lay of the land. I think anyone with any common sense wouldn't say any different. We're all still refinding our place in this new this new landscape. But I'm really enjoying giving the adjustments again. Yes.
Yeah, it's so nice to hear you say that, because it's so easy to make an assumption about what people want and don't want. And when it comes to touch in the class, that happens all the time. And I was just saying off air to Dominique, one of the things that's really important about a group discussion is that if you've got your own particular bias as a teacher because of how you feel about being touched, or an experience that you had that wasn't pleasant, or you've got perhaps a little bit more fear around what's going on with COVID, that's going to definitely influence whether or not you think people want touch, because you're going to be projecting your relationship to being touched onto other people, which may or may not be the case. And it's good to check. It's good to check, because there are always going to be people that say yes, and there are always going to be people that say no. And it's a fluid dynamic thing, which is why the culture of having cards in a classroom has been there, so that people can change their mind when it comes to consent. I think one of the things that's really interesting for me is watching how much the culture swung hard from one place to the other. So when I reflect on witnessing more of an Iyengar style or an Ashtanga style, it seemed to be that maybe 10 years ago, maybe more, getting an adjustment in a class didn't really need to be a big thing. There didn't need to be a big announcement. There didn't need to be a big kind of consideration about whether or not it was appropriate. It was just sort of part and parcel of the teacher is teaching, and part of that teaching is physical touch. And when I look back at some of the kind of videos that are there with Iyengar, you can look at that now and sort of, it's quite intense, quite brutal. There wasn't really any checking in or consent there. It was just, this is the teacher, this is how they teach, you accept that. And then I think bringing in these notions of trauma-informed concepts, and Mara, you've probably got a lot more knowledge of this than I with the field that you work in. But it felt to me that when the trauma-informed yoga started to become more prevalent and people were really interested to learn about it, then the pendulum kind of swung right away the other side, where to touch someone was a massive deal. And it is a massive deal, but to the point where if you messed that up or you didn't check, you could be demonized. And a whole bunch of other stuff in there as well.
Yeah.
Now I kind of feel like, even though we're kind of moving through the tail end of COVID, maybe, I don't know, the pendulum always kind of does that, and then it wants to come back into the middle. So I'd like to think that that's where we're headed as we emerge from COVID. I don't know, Laura, do you have a thought about that from your training perspective at all?
I suppose very wary of touch because of that trauma side of things, because I've also done training in iRest, Yoga Nidra. So you might be dealing with people with trauma and anxiety and depression. But I have found in the classes that I teach, you can pick up quite quickly, even just from the energy that someone generates when you're near them. Yeah, whether or not they want to be touched, but asking is always the way to go.
And when you say that you can pick up on the energy, what are some of the things that you might observe in someone that makes you...
They tend to pull away a little bit, or you can notice that they tense up. Yeah, they can get a little bit wary and whatever. Again, it depends on what you're doing, and I suppose where you're touching as well. If you're in a warrior two pose or something like that, and you just come and perhaps touch the arm, but you're always face on, never come up behind someone. They don't tend to mind that so much, but yeah, it's just something. I suppose I don't use touch as much with the COVID situation as I would have in the past.
Yeah. It's
Oh, I can't hear you, Dominique. Yeah, I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Yeah, you're back.
Is that better? Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Let me just
Can you hear me, Dominique?
I can hear you now. I don't know what's happened to my microphone, but anyway. Yes, so I think Karina really verbalized and described what's happened really perfectly, and fingers crossed that we are coming into a more sort of settled middle ground, because I feel like prior to about 10 years ago, although after everything that's happened in recent history, my sense of time is a little bit fuzzy, let's put it that way. But I feel like prior to 10 years ago, as you said, Karina, it was sort of just taken for granted almost that was part of yoga teaching, that there was going to be some element of touch involved in what was going on. And then we had the Me Too movement, and we had some really unfortunate events in the yogaverse, let's say, that sort of sprung out, not necessarily as a result of that, but I think it was a bit of a perfect storm, if you like. And we also had this rise of popularity in trauma-informed teaching. So as I say, it feels to me, and this is just an opinion, therefore it's tainted and imperfect even before it leaves my lips, but I feel like it was just this perfect storm of people just backing right off from adjustments. Oh, and another element in this situation was the fact that teacher training programs, again, it feels to me like about 10 years ago, teacher training programs went from being 350 plus 500 hours as the gold standard, to then 200-hour programs taking over, which is a a whole nother side discussion. But all of that happened about 10 years ago. And of course, when you've only got 200 hours in a teacher training program, you've barely got enough time to cover the essentials, let alone the time that you need to really mentor with someone to learn those hands-on adjusting. So it lost favor, it fell out of fashion, and then for some really pragmatic reasons, it also just sort of fell by the wayside and started to get lost. But I feel like, as I said, now coming back post-COVID, people are either coming back super hungry, super keen for adjustments, or really reticent, not interested. And as you say, Mara, I feel like it's pretty easy to tell one person from the other. But on that note, one of the things I've started to do, and I always got consent. Getting consent that's a non-negotiable. And I feel like I always did that, but I've now started, since coming back into teaching in studio, I've started getting consent twice. So when someone comes up to reception to check into the class, we actually have in the studios that I'm working out of at the moment, there is a sign and a bowl of pegs in one studio and a bowl of touchstones in another studio. And at that first interaction, when someone comes into the class, there's that opportunity to say hello and to remind that student that there is the potential for touch in the class. If you are uncomfortable, please let us know by grabbing one of these indicators, a stone or a peg or a card or whatever you're using, and just pop that at the top of your mat so that we know to respect your wishes. What I've been doing is I'm just calling it secondary consent, and having a secondary check-in with people. And right at the beginning of the class, as I'm sort of just welcoming everyone, so this is after that initial check-in at reception, at the beginning of the class, I will again repeat myself to say, I know some of you quite well, others of you I don't know that well, and I have already checked in with you at reception about the fact that I do a lot of hands-on adjusting. And even if you have said yes to an adjustment, sometimes in the moment, for whatever reason, you're not feeling steady, you're not feeling balanced, or you realize, oh, that's right, my shoulder's been giving me a bit of dramas the last 2 weeks. I really don't want to receive an adjustment in Prasarita C, for example. I usually manage to say it a lot more eloquently than I'm doing right now, but it will be something along the lines of, even if you said yes outside at reception, you have full agency in this room. And I always use that sentence. You have full agency over your body in this room. So if you see me approaching you to adjust you, and in that moment you change your mind, that's okay. And just to shoo me away. And I feel like that's become a really important part of my teaching as well, because I'm within myself, I'm really secure. And that's something that's so incredibly important if you are a teacher who chooses to perform adjustments. And I think it's worthwhile mentioning actually that even though we're having this conversation about touch and adjusting, there are so many amazing teachers that don't do any touch and don't do any adjusting. And I want to just be clear that if that is your choice and your preference, then that's absolutely fine. Yeah, touch and physical adjustments, that doesn't define a good teacher in my opinion. But if you are going to choose to adjust, you yourself have to feel very confident, very secure, very grounded, and be holding good space for yourself. And the reason I'm mentioning this is I'm finding that secondary check-in just gives me that extra bit of confidence. I need to know, all right, these people are very clear about what is happening in the room, and so I can relax and do my job without that anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that green light moment is super important for teachers to have that confidence to know yeah, I'm good to go here, rather than second guessing yourself or being nervous as you approach because you're not sure. Because as we were saying before, and as Mara was saying, the energy is palpable. And in a yin context, I do something similar, and I would call an adjustment in yin workshopping with someone to see if they want to add a prop, or workshopping with someone to see if they need some guidance or some ideas on how to rearrange the shape a little bit better so that we can be exploring the target areas, because the approach is more body part focused than cues for everybody that might be more similar. And so I'll always set up the class and say, if at any point you feel like you need more support, maybe you're not feeling anything in the shape, maybe it's too strong or not strong enough for you, putting a hand up is a great way to let me know to come over. And so, but then not everyone's going to do that, because there's a whole bunch of internal things that go on for people that go, oh, I don't want to make a fuss, I'll work it out, I don't want to draw attention to myself, or I don't want to bother the teacher. So even if we've given people, hey, here's how you can non-verbally communicate with me about what you need from me or what you don't want from me, there's always going to be that margin of people in the room that don't action it for their own reasons. But then, so then I'm like, someone puts their hand up, great, I can move over there with confidence because I'm wanted. We have an agreement. But if they don't, and I suspect that something is a little bit off, or from my own experience of seeing something over and over and over again, a common pattern in people's bodies, and I go, I suspect that something's going on there that could be different, I'd like to offer them something that they could try. I'm well aware though that they didn't put up their hand. So if I go over there, I'm taking a calculated risk that I might be encroaching their space. And if they are not okay with me being there, I don't take it personally at all, or I make a strong attempt to not take it personally, but just to go, oh, okay, you've entered someone's space, they didn't give you a green light, it could go one of two ways. So you've got to be okay with it going wherever it goes. But yeah, those moments of how do I set up communication in this room where people know how to let me know that they need something when I'm the only one talking is really important. And the reason that I do, like, people will always ask me, do you do hands-on adjustments in yin? And I'd love to ask you a question after this, Dominique, about why we would even give an adjustment in the first place. But in a yin practice, particularly if you are watching this, listening to this, and you haven't practiced yin yoga before, the whole idea of yin yoga, to be safe, is for you as the student to be paying really close attention to how much feels like too much and how much feels like not enough, which is so completely subjective. And I can't tell you what will be too much in your body. You have to be the one paying attention. So when I'm guiding people through an experience, I'll always be getting them to reflect on that for themselves. And it might even be something like, in this shape that we're in right now, that's targeting the hip flexor area, which is like a lunge shape, where do you feel like the intensity is sitting for you out of 10? We're looking for it to be somewhere between 4 and 7. You're 4 and 7 out of 10. So where do you think it is right now? What else is going on in your body that might let you know that it's too much? Are you tensing up? As Mara said before, are you guarding? Are you squeezing your teeth? Are you holding your breath? They're all going to be self-diagnostic tools to tell you that it's that edge that they talk about in yin. You're kind of creeping up a little too strongly to it. So back. But if I was to come over and push someone deeper into the shape or place more external force on their body, one, that's not the intention of yin. And two, how they can measure their edge gets really, really muddy, because at what point do they know what they're feeling is their body? And at what point do they know it's from me adding into that? And also the practice is so quiet and slow that people can get into a very quiet little bubble. And if I come and encroach that space, there can be a real hypersensitivity around that. So that's why I would never put any hands on someone in yin. Occasionally I might put a hand on a shoulder or a back, and that would be more of a emotional support moment if it felt like it was needed. And I would just have to be really, really clear on myself about why I'm doing that, who I'm doing that to, and how safe safe. I've created the space for them, and we're probably not strangers. We probably haven't met that day. But that's why like an actual physical hands-on pushing or manipulating of someone's body in yin just doesn't really work for me, in my opinion. But I'd love to ask you, Dominique, from a teacher's perspective, what are the reasons that you would be doing an adjustment in the first place?
Okay. The first reason is to keep them safe. If someone is doing something that is potentially hazardous to themselves or someone else in the room, then that's the first and the most important reason to be offering an adjustment. And then a second reason to offer, and that's that I suppose you can call that your sort of first tier, almost like beginners adjusting mindset. So it's there to keep the students safe, and not just that student, but the students around them. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone sort of jumping up and doing TikToks or Shakti kicks and, faffing around with jumping into handstands when no one else in the room is doing it, and the potential for them to just take someone else out is there. So anyway, so there's that safety issue. But then as you get into students who are a little bit more experienced in the practice and a little bit more comfortable in the shapes in their own skin, if you like, there's another kind of adjustment that comes in whereby you may be guiding a student a little bit more deeply into the shape. But I'd like to put a very clear caveat in that it's never about externally grappling them into a shape that they couldn't find themselves. So it's a very gentle, hands-on demonstration of, oh, actually, no, you do have more space in your shoulder. For example, in a bind with the arm, it's all about how we articulate the arm moving into that bind. So just taking someone through the little steps involved in a safe bind can show them, oh no, actually, if I approach it that way, I myself have that within me. The point I'm trying to make is that it's never about us as the teacher exerting our will and artificially manhandling or, as I say, grappling someone into a shape. And then another reason is to show the students where the energetic focus needs to be in the shape, or where the muscular activation could be slightly stronger or slightly softer in the shape. But ultimately, a good adjustment, whether it's verbal or hands-on, I know we're focusing on hands-on adjusting and touch today, but I think it's worth mentioning that sometimes the best adjustment is words, and that's actually first prize. If you can achieve something just using your words, and that's your safest option always. But coming back to the idea of hands-on adjusting, it's never about us exerting our will or taking someone artificially into the shape. And it's also, again, I'm aware that this is just my opinion, but it's also about getting the student to become more confident and competent on their own and in themselves, not about learning that, to get into this shape, I need Dominique to do it for me, which is a little bit of an issue in the Ashtanga tradition back when I was doing a lot of Mysore style practice. You'd sort of get to that shape and then wait for your teacher to come to wrangle you into Marichidi, because that was the only way that you could get into it. And that, to me, that's a bad adjustment. Yes, you might be able to get your student into that shape, or well done for you and well done for the student, but a good adjustment shows you how they can access that on their own independently of you. It shouldn't make the student more dependent on you. yeah, I don't know how I ended up there, but that's what I wanted to say.
I love that. I love that. I feel like that. I feel a strong resonance with that as a teacher too, that where I'm at now as a teacher, it feels like the most important thing is to be handing the practice back to the student and trying to not set up any extra opportunities for too much codependency or strong dependency. Because another thing that I really feel I've observed in the yoga world is, and I think it just happens when we're in a relationship with a teacher and there's a group of students and a teacher, it's so easy to hand the power over to the teacher and disregard things that are going on in your own body because they're not in alignment with what the teacher says you should be feeling or should be able to do or whatever. So they kind of can set the standard. And if you're getting pain or if you're getting a compressive sensation in your body, that you will kind of, you'll do something to those things that come up that's less important than what the teacher has said is the important thing. So yeah, I think it's really important that you've said what you've just said, because to have that feeling of, oh, I have to have the teacher here with me to do this thing really does, it can become such a block, because the whole point is that we're trying to help people return to themselves or discover themselves or get to know themselves better. And if we're in the way, they're going to be ignoring a whole bunch of stuff that's there to be witnessed and listened to. So thank you for saying that. That's yeah, means a lot to hear you say that.
Yeah. And look, it's something that I can speak to with some authority because I've done it myself, and it is something that is, and look, in my to the best of my knowledge, the whole hands-on adjusting art form was something that really sprung from the Ashtanga tradition. Yes, Iyengar does have a lot of adjusting as well, but I feel like their focus is more on propping as a form of adjusting, and sometimes just brute force and intimidation. Those Iyengar teachers can be scary. I'm just kidding. I love you, Iyengar teachers. In fact, if I had it my way and someone made me queen of the Yogaverse, I would decree that anyone who started yoga spent a good 2 years in an Iyengar studio before they did anything else. So, no, my comments are not meant to be disrespectful to Iyengar. But anyway, I digress. My understanding is that the whole hands-on adjusting art form really is something that came a lot from Ashtanga and was very popularized in that Mysore room. And it was something that I did, and it was Marichasana D that it was for me as well, because that's usually where, if you haven't got stuck in one of the shapes prior to that, which is about halfway through primary series, you will definitely get stuck in Marichi. And I would actually just find myself just waiting, because I had then developed this relationship with the whole sequence where I knew at that stage I'd have a little break and wait for the teacher to come and get me into that shape. And because of that, it actually held me back in my progression, because I had this really convenient excuse to not progress and not own that shape myself. It was easier to have the teacher wrangle me into it, and it set me up for some pretty gnarly injuries as well. So yeah, I think it's really important to just restate this fundamental idea. I'm trying to choose my words really carefully. Not a rule, but a really important precept in adjusting, that it is never about taking the student somewhere that they couldn't find on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the people listening to this that are offering adjustments and are wanting to develop that skill set some more, it feels like that's a really important thing to write down or listen to it again and write it down. So that in that moment, just before you enter into a student's space, when you're looking around the room, because when I first started doing adjustments, I think it was so exciting and you wanted to practice your skill that you were like sharply looking around the room for opportunity. Like, oh, yep, that person, I'm going to give them that child's pose adjustment. And oh, yep, here comes a downward facing dog adjustment. But I think you need to be just a little bit more graceful in the moment before you charge over to someone's mat to go, well, ask yourself, what am I doing? Why am I offering this adjustment? Can I remember in this moment that this is not me communicating to the student that what they're doing is wrong, or that I'm fixing them, or that I am putting my will onto their body, as Dominique said before? Can I say to myself mentally before I put my hands on their body, and there's probably a bunch of other things that Dominique might want to add to that before you go over and just touch someone, that what I'm about to do is me offering a moment to this person to show them where they might be headed, and I'm just giving them a little taster, or I'm giving them an insight into the future, if they want it or not, that there's potential movement in this direction, but this is not me stepping in to suddenly create a relationship with them that now says your downward facing dog's only going to be better if I come over and I'm there doing it with you. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything that you just said, Karina. And the thing that I wanted to add, because there is, and look, it's completely understandable as a teacher, whether you are a new teacher or an established teacher, when you learn something new, of course, you're going to be really eager to get out there and start putting that into practice. And that's one of the things that I say to my students and to my mentees all the time. It's like, as soon as you learn something new, the best way to actually really metabolize that information is to go out and teach it. And that is still true, but we need to be really mindful and careful with that well-meaning enthusiasm when we go out there. And the point I want to make is this: there's value in the struggle. There's value in letting your students struggle with the shape. You don't have to go in there and fix it. I don't even really like that word. Yeah, but you don't need to go in there and make alterations in every shape for everyone. On that note, it might be valuable to mention that this is my opinion, but I think it's not great practice to be hands-on assisting new students. I think we need to, because there can be that that impression from the student that I'm doing something wrong, I'm being corrected, and I don't think that's a valuable. I don't think that's a necessarily helpful tint to put on the relationship right at the beginning. So there's that, and also stand back and watch and actually give them 5 breaths in the shape, so that you as the teacher can actually see really where they're at, rather than waiting. And this is one of the issues I have, and maybe we can go down this track in the conversation. You can't really adjust in a vinyasa flow class in the traditional sense of a vinyasa flow class, where it's one breath, one movement. There's just no way to do it. So there's that as a side issue. But give your students 4 to 5 breaths in a shape, or give them a couple of rounds of the shape where you're just observing them to see what's going on, before you automatically decide that this is a good opportunity for me to practice what I've just learnt. Or I think that there's value in giving your students some space, so that you can actually see authentically what's going on, and give yourself some space as well, just to reassess, is that adjustment really necessary? And aside from that, as I said when I started this little thread, I think that there's value in the struggle, and I think actually more and more as I am becoming less young and more experienced in my craft, I'm starting to really appreciate resilience and the building of resilience. You know, remembering that what happens to us on the yoga mat ideally is a little petri dish, a little microcosm for how we tackle life off the mat. And there's not a lot of resilience out there at the moment. That's a whole nother conversations with Karina and Dominique episode maybe. But but I feel like when we encounter a shape that it's really difficult to breathe in, or a shape that it's just really a complex shape that maybe our body at that time, or maybe just the design of our joints, of our bones, just, you know, doesn't move like that, where there's struggle, that's the opportunity to build resilience. In fact, it's the only thing that does develop resilience. Like, we know this from a nervous system perspective. So even though we're having this conversation about hands-on adjusting and helping our students, I feel like there's also room here to step back and have some acknowledgement of the fact that sometimes the best help we can give a student is to allow them to struggle a little bit, of course, as long as that's not going to result in any injury, but to let them struggle and let them find their way, instead of thinking we have to pounce on and make that the perfect trikonasana.
Yeah. I feel like this is probably just the yin teacher in me, but I never really look around the room and see things as flawed or wrong, or that people are not doing the shape right, because my yin brain is always, well, this is exactly what's meant to be happening for this person. And sometimes the best thing we can do for anybody and for ourselves is to get out of the way. So how am I going to learn something in a moment if someone's witnessing me and they can see my, you know, quote unquote struggle, and they, with the best of their intentions, they want to come in and make the experience better for me before I have a tough time. And that happens, I think that happens a lot in adjusting, hands-on adjusting. And I watched this a lot when I was helping with the teacher trainees when they would have their practice teaching rounds. There'd be this sense of, oh, I can see something happening. I don't have the words for it, but this is obviously what I do in my life, is I rush over there and I try and fix. And before I've really verbalized anything, I've got my hands on someone and I'm trying to fix it, which is a massive teaching opportunity for that training, that teacher in training, that yoga teacher in training, to go, hey, how comfortable are you with witnessing something that you would like to be better for you, that's actually got nothing to do with you? How comfortable are you to just stop and feel that impulse rise up in you and just stay at that impulse before it becomes an unconscious rushing over and a touching of another person? Do you have the skill to just breathe and find something verbal, or to actually be okay to watch this person having what you deem to be a struggle, or what you deem to be an incorrect posture? Something really important's happening for that person on their mat. And if you rush over there and you intercept it, maybe you might be taking that learning moment away from them. And that's sort of what happened to me with the last kind of years of me teaching flow. I became quite hands off because, I was just really influenced by yin yoga at that time. And I thought, actually, I don't want to intercept someone's process, and I don't want to. So things like doing shavasana adjustments, even though I loved them myself and it was really yummy for me in shavasana, I felt like, gosh, this person's just wrung themselves out on their mat. If I play music that's super emotional or lyrical, I might be laying on a synthetic moment on their moment. Something organic and natural has the opportunity to float up here and be felt and received. I don't want to get in the way of that at all. So I would rather sit back and be extremely present to what's going on, and be a teacher that's really teaching by not getting in there and interfering, and just let people have their process. And that felt really good for me. Yeah, I'm not sure what we're talking about now. I'm just sharing.
Oh, the sharing's great. How's all this traveling for you, Mara? Are you enjoying this conversation? Is there anything that you wanted to offer or ask?
Hang on. Oh, I'm loving it. I am loving it. I'm just listening, and I'm taking some notes, and it's just reinforcing a lot of what I have felt over the years as well. And I love the idea of what we do on our yoga mats, like a petri dish. I think it's fantastic, and with resilience, yes, it's so important, to be able to build that, from young to older. And I was smiling to myself when you talked about getting slightly older, because it changes how you view things too, and what I look for in students, and that they, as long as they're not hurting themselves, that's the main thing, or as you say, anyone else, but trying to use my words. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you.
No worries. I just wanted to check in with you, Mara, and of course, please do feel free to chime in. I'm really enjoying this conversation as well. And something I'm aware that this conversation was supposed to be on touch and hands-on adjusting, but one of the things that has been the inevitable result of teaching via Zoom, which, by the way, if someone had told me how much I would enjoy teaching by Zoom, I would not have believed them. No. But it's at least 50% still of the way that I teach. I'm grateful because it's enabled me to stay connected with people and reconnect with students from all over the world, which is phenomenal. But I actually feel like it has made me a better teacher. I really do, because all of those adjustments and all of those tactile cues and skills that maybe I'd become a little bit complacent on, they were all taken away, and so all I had was my words. And I'm now at a point where obviously there's always room to grow, but I feel like I'm now at a point where my verbal game is super sharp. It was pretty good before, but this whole experience has really really tempered that and made it even more solid. And I'm now at a point where I'm teaching full primary series via live stream without me demonstrating any of the shapes. It's purely verbal, and I think that there is really an important side note, even within this conversation about touch and adjusting, a really important side note here to be made, that sharpening and tailoring and working on your verbal cues is just so important. Whether you touch a student or not in your yoga teaching career, as I said earlier, that does not make a good teacher. But those verbal chops and your language and your delivery, that is just so important. And sometimes it's not until that option's taken off of the table that you realize how important that is.
Yeah. 100%. And I reiterated that a lot with all the students that you and I have both had that have come through their TT on Zoom that might have been a bit disappointed and unsure if they were going to be good teachers because they weren't in a room with people. And I said, actually, you know what? If we could reframe that, you've got an incredible opportunity here to work on your language skills and your tone and your pace and your choice of words. That's actually really great, because that is a tool in your toolkit that has to be a strong tool, you know. And for the student that rushed over and touched someone, I think the homework I gave her was, when you're teaching now, you need to have your hands behind your back to try and avoid that natural impulse.
Yeah.
And speaking of words, I feel like it would be really useful for teachers that are wanting to start doing adjustments in their classes to perhaps talk about what the intention of adjusting is. So as you've just unpacked before, why somebody might be receiving an adjustment, why giving it to a brand new student might not be received well, why it could be confusing. There's still a lot of room in there for people to be unsure as to why they're being approached unless they're really used to it. And I think one of the things that, in my observation, has often been missed in cues anyway in the yoga world is the why. So sometimes there'll be like very particular detailed cues given, but not really with a reason why, or what it is that we're hoping the student will investigate or find in their body with this minutia. And I think that the why of why you might receive a hands-on adjustment being announced at the top of the class would be really helpful, so that it clears up that confusion. You know, I might be giving some hands-on adjustments today. Sometimes these adjustments are to help you feel something slightly different in the body, or to help you find more space in a particular shape. The long-term, you know, the long-term outcome of an adjustment is that you'll discover something for you that has nothing to do with me, or however people might phrase it. And just to fill in those little blanks, because of that pendulum swing where we've come from a place where there was probably no warning, it was just suddenly, what, I'm being manhandled and pretzeled. What? Okay, this is yoga. That's my teacher. Full respect. Thanks for doing what you did. I don't know why you did it. Ow. Thank you. We'll do it again someday. To nothing, and maybe do this, and perhaps you could do this, and like a real backing away of anything directive in case it's offensive. Just filling in those gaps and being clear. Here's some of the things you might anticipate today. Here's the reason why. Totally fine if that's not what you want. I think that that's been missed a lot of the time.
And I think to borrow a phrase from what you were saying earlier, Karina, it's my suspicion, my gut feeling, and I hope I'm right. But I feel like this is actually going to be a really positive evolution in yoga teaching, because we have, as you said, we've gone from, you know, back when I started practicing in the mid-90s, it was very much that dynamic where the teacher was very much on a pedestal. They could get away with a lot of bullshit that they probably, you know, there was a lot of funky, questionable stuff going on, but no one questioned it, because there was this sort of mysticism and romance, and maybe for some people there's something quite nice about handing your power over to someone else to sort out your problems. I mean, that's, again, it's probably a whole nother conversation, but I feel like we went from one extreme that wasn't particularly healthy for everyone, that's obvious, to this other extreme where no one was allowed to touch at all for one reason or another. We mentioned earlier, we had the sort of Me Too, the rise of the trauma-informed stuff, the fact that people weren't learning and didn't have the time in a 200-hour teacher training, or didn't have the access to mentors, because you really need to, you know, to be there in person with someone to learn this. And now my sincere hope and my feeling is that we are going to, hopefully through more conversations like this, come to a new place where there's a renaissance of touch, but it's a very considered, very thoughtful touch, and a reaffirmation. Is that a word? Yeah, I'm going to go with it. A reaffirmation of the importance of using your eyes, letting the student figure things out themselves a little bit first, and using our words as our primary go-to. And if that is the result of, you know, this crazy pendulum swinging, if that's where the end result of where we end up as a middle ground, I think that's a good place. Bring it on.
Yeah, I love that. I love that as a hopeful message for what might be coming and blossoming. I'd also love to just really reiterate for people how much is communicated through touch that you might not even be consciously aware of, and why it's super important that whatever choice you make, whether you're going to do this or not, like, great, make your choices, but to be so respectful of that process and what might come as a result of it, because the second that you make that commitment to go, yes, I'm going to put my hands on another person's body, you might not even be aware of what you're communicating truly through your touch. And that can be all sorts of things, from I'm going to come and help make this better for you, or I've got something that's going to make this feel great, or no, you're doing it wrong, let me, whatever it is. Like, if you think about any time that you touch another person, whether it's something to comfort another person, whether it's aggression, whether it's getting someone to back away, whether it's really intimate, whether it's whatever it is, you're probably not even fully aware just how much is communicated through touch, but the person receiving it is going to feel that. And sometimes that communication that's nonverbal can be so much more powerful than words, and you might not even know what you're masking, but your hands are going to be really honest. So that's the hesitancy in your hands. That's the extra strong approach with your hands. It's the amount of force. It's how you enter and how you exit. And you really have to be aware of just that your hands can communicate so much, even if you're not quite sure what that is. Because once that's happened, however that's received by the person, you've put an imprint into them. And if you think about a yoga class where people are already slowing down their breath, hopefully already kind of pulling away from all their other external stuff, and they're a little bit more tuned into their own energetic field, and you enter that field and you add something to that, or you've got something to say about what's happening in their energetic field, there will be a ripple. It might be great, it might be really negative, it might be everything in between, but just to know that you're having an interaction. And I think for me, that's why I just didn't want to do that. And I sat back and just went, right, what am I witnessing? What can I feel in the room? What might be just one word I could add, or one phrase I could add into the room with the same intention that I might be putting hands on someone's body, but I'm doing it with my energetic field without that actual contact. And that was a lovely thing to explore. So just take that on board if you hadn't already.
And something that I'd like to add to that, Karina, is just reaffirming what you've just said in terms of touch conveys so much. Where our hands are, not to get too sort of out there or esoteric, but our hands are access points or openings of the heart chakra. So much gets communicated through touch, and it's really important as a teacher to be paying really close attention to your own space. We talk about holding space for others, but if you are not really connected to your own practice, and if you're not really disciplined about making sure that you are holding good space for yourself, then that's where teachers start to get burnt out. That's where hands-on adjustments start to get a little bit murky. And we are currently in the sort of a bit of an emotional and energetic hangover after the last couple of years, and absolutely everyone is still recovering from that. I feel like there's still a lot of adrenaline, like we're still running on a lot of excitement because we're back, things have opened back up, and I don't know that we've had a full realization or it's fully hit energetically, emotionally, even physically. I think we're still rebounding. Is that's the yin term? I think we're still rebounding. I don't know that we've actually stopped yet. All right. So my point is this: if we ourselves know what a strong impact, and I'm going to use some strong language. If we ourselves know how traumatized and how affected we have been by the last 2 years as human beings, then when we put our teaching hat on and when we put our practitioner goggles on, sorry, that's just brought a really interesting image to my head. But anyway, when we're practicing, when we're teaching, when we're living, it's really crucial to make sure that we're well steeped in our own practices, and to be very, very clear about, as the teacher, honestly, like, how am I today? I mean, it was always important. Don't get me wrong, it was always important, but I feel like it's even more important now because everyone's been affected by it. To be very clear in your intentions, in your energy, and to be very steeped in your own practices, and to be drawing on lots of other. I've been drawing on a lot of somatic practices, and some of them from the trauma-informed tradition, and other techniques just from polyvagal, Tai Chi, lots and lots of pranayama, to bring not only into my classes to share with my students, but more importantly on this point, to make sure that I am using those practices myself, so that I'm very clear and I'm in a good space before I'm offering adjusting. Because that comes through in the touch.
And if I may, I think that also means that if you're a teacher who has decided that adjustments are something that you're going to do in your classes, it doesn't mean that you're not a good teacher if on a day that you are just not centered energetically, you decide not to adjust. It actually probably is more respectful for you to go, you know what, I'm here, I'm present, but there's something that's been going on for me this morning that I haven't quite been able to leave at the door, because we are humans and we are rebounding still, as Dominique said. It's probably more respectful to you and your students to go, you know what, it's not a great day for me to be putting my hands on anybody today. I'm not going to be adjusting today. And you don't have to announce that, but that just might be your conscious choice for the day, rather than thinking, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted, I'm so distracted by XYZ that just happened, but I'm here and I've got to show up and I've got to do well. I'm going to be actually kind of rippling into everyone else's nervous systems with my unregulated nervous system, if that makes sense. So don't think that if you've made the decision to adjust, you've got to do it every time.
Yeah, it's such an important point. Because that would be, that's the good teaching. That's wisdom shining through there, and self-awareness and self-control, and caring and appreciating others. Because you, as a beginner teacher, or I can see how people might sort of get that a bit confused maybe, or think, oh, like you were saying, I have to turn up, I have to adjust, I have to put all of this, whatever it is that I was dealing with, because as you say, we're human. Yeah. And yeah, that's actually best practice first and foremost. When in doubt, conserve your attention, conserve your energy, turn that back in on yourself. As you say, Karina, you don't need to make a big announcement. I don't think that's actually helpful. Yeah, it's not about you, as my sister likes to say. I really like that. Yeah, you don't need to draw attention to it. You just need to do your thing. But absolutely, if you are, for whatever reason, mentally, physically, emotionally, not feeling, remember what Patanjali says about that state of asana. If you're not feeling steady and you're not feeling easeful within yourself, then don't share that instability and that dis-ease with anyone else. And have the wherewithal to stay connected to yourself, because that's hard. Sometimes you don't realize what's going on, but make it a point to check in and be clear, especially before giving those hands-on adjustments. I'm loving this conversation. It's great.
Well, it's such a layered thing, and the reason that we wanted to have a dedicated time to unpack it is that there's just so many different layers that you can get into. And a quick chat here and there about adjusting is very, very different than a session dedicated to learning some of the skills. Both of them are really important because there is so much to consider. It's not just, I can see this person on their mat and, in my mind, they would benefit a lot from me giving an adjustment. It's like, hang on, there's about 50,000 other things that are layered into this moment if I choose to connect and do this. And I've got to be aware of that so that I can make a conscious choice about what happens. Yeah, and on that, where am I at today? I'm already holding space for a group of people. I'm already guiding people in their practice. If I make that choice to not be doing anything extra with hands-on, I'm actually showing myself that I can create good boundaries for myself rather than thinking, which is very prevalent in the service industries, which includes healthcare, which includes teaching, which includes yoga. It's very, very prevalent for us to be overgivers and think, in order for people to have a great experience, I've got to give so much of myself, and then wonder why I'm exhausted later. Where am I in that? No one's asking me to come to class and completely exhaust myself by scurrying around and giving as many adjustments as I possibly could because I want to do well and I want them to have an amazing time. And in my psyche or in my relationship to myself, I've got this notion that in order to do that, I've got to give. We've had conversations recently about, and I interviewed Gabrielle Harris recently, who's just amazing. She wrote The Language of Yin. We talked a lot about how this, what comes with maturity and experience is often a massive paring back where you say less and you do less, but it's so rich and full. And so, like the whole class could be so exceptionally rich and the teacher might say next to nothing. It doesn't have to be about how much you do or that you give for someone to have an experience that's high value. And I think that also goes with, with our language as well. You don't have to say 20 phenomenal cues in 1 minute. How well is that going to be digested? And probably too with touch. If it's minimal and small and that's how you begin, that can be a lot. And that might be heaps for one person. And for you who's just stepping into that place of going, okay, I'm deciding I'm going to start offering, I've checked and it's okay. Do I go in with some big Bertha adjustment, or do I just start with something simple like the hands on the back in downward dog that Dominique showed our group recently, which is great? That more isn't always more. And you're not less as a teacher for not giving your all. There you go. I think you should write that down as well.
Yeah, that's a quote. It's a quotable quote, Karina. It really is, and I really resonate with that, because it's something that that I know that I definitely was doing early on in the piece, in my well-intended, fiery, you know, drive to be of service, and you know, very pitter, get in there, and I've got to wrangle bodies, and I've got to be amazing, and yeah, so definitely describing me,
and me too. That's why I can speak to it from the heart, because that's the journey I'm on, and Dominique's on, and probably lots of you that are listening are on as well. Like, wow, I've been giving so much of myself.
And I think it's interesting, again, maybe this is something that comes with age and experience, but I don't intend for what I'm about to say to sort of be condescending. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, but I'm casting my mind to teachers that I've had over the years that have had the most profound impact on me. And they're actually not the ones with the most amazing collection of cues, although I do love myself a collection of cues. And they certainly weren't the ones who were necessarily there wrangling me into really complex shapes, although I really enjoy a good wrangling from time to time. But the most potent influences on me have been teachers who less was more. And it wasn't about the words that they were saying. And this is a point I'm wanting to make here. It wasn't about the words and the cues that they were offering, nor was it necessarily about the hands-on adjusting, although this is what we're talking about today, but rather it was their presence. Just their presence. So this comes back to this idea of holding space, which was a big theme of this last mentoring group that Karina and I ran. So maybe it's just really sort of at the forefront of my consciousness, because it's been such a big part of those group discussions. But even maybe the most important thing as a teacher is to be in sukha, be in a good space yourself. And ironically, and even as I say the words, as a part of my pitta personality that doesn't quite believe me, so I have to verbalize it just to convince myself, that weird part of my ego. But the greatest thing that you can do is to really reaffirm your connection and your commitment to your practice, and make sure that that is just a non-negotiable, because that's what enables you to be entrenched and grounded in your space. And that's actually where so much of the teaching is coming across. So much influence, or as you might say, Karina, so much influence is coming through. What do they say? 80% of communication is non-verbal. And as I said, when I think back to those teachers who have had the most profound impact on me, it's not been through an adjustment, it's not been through a verbal cue, it's just something in the way that they hold themselves, this presence, this certainty, this unspoken transference of wisdom or energy or something that came through. But it's, yeah, I'm going to stop talking now, because I feel like I'm starting to get lost in the reeds there. But gee, that's just so important. And I think I was so busy distracting myself with acquiring cues and acquiring skills and reading the books and learning this and learning that, and which is it's a relevant and appropriate phase of evolution to go through. It really is. But to constantly remind yourself, lest you get waylaid by the collecting of the cues or the collecting of the knowledge, how are you applying all of that to you? How's your practice? How's your relationship with yourself? How is that then transferring into your teaching? And yes, collect the knowledge, get the info, but how are you actually applying that to yourself is what I wanted to say.
Yeah. What I hear when you say that about the teachers that had the biggest impact is that they were so grounded in whatever it was that they did to help them find that steadiness, that they had that as a constant. And as we talked before about how if you come to class and you're really dysregulated, you will dysregulate all the nervous systems in the room from a good intentioned place, but from a really scattered reality. Whereas you could turn up and be steady because of that, chipping away that happens when you are rooted in your practice without it being about reading books. It's just sitting with yourself, whether it's on the mat, moving and breathing or meditating or whatever it is that you choose to do that helps you get closer to self. And then that is the feeling that everybody else gets to co-regulate with.
I think I wish in a way I could sort of just be a little Jiminy Cricket on the walls of yoga teachers. And again, I'm totally am guilty of doing this, but sort of rushing around before a class, trying to frantically plan something or program a playlist and sort of getting quite frenetic in my energy, well-meaning, well-intentioned, but not particularly well-directed or well-spent energy, trying to tick all those checklists and make all the class plans, letting that unknowingly sort of frazzle me, and then taking that into the class, whereas that time would have been so much better spent in my own practice, in my own breathing, creating a little bit more stability, not thinking that having the perfect class plan or that last minute rushing around, for me it was cleaning, last minute, what can I dust? What can I make perfect for people? That energy would have been so much better placed in just having an extra 5 minutes of quiet, breath work and getting myself settled. But this is the beauty of hindsight, yeah, and the wisdom of becoming less young and more experienced is that you get to really see. You get to see this in action. You get to be it in action, and then you get to just be it. And try and warn people down the line, don't do it.
But it's also all perfect. It unfolds perfectly. All of us can look back and think, if only I knew then what I know now. But you only know it now because you didn't know it then. It is all perfect. So, we get really caught up in everything having to be perfect, and getting comfortable with discomfort is pretty profound skill. That's in the company of people in your life, that's in people in the class, that moment of going, okay, things are being stirred up here, and it's okay. I'm getting stirred up and it's okay. My dog is getting stirred up and it's okay. That is a skill. That is definitely, and when we talked before about the struggle being a rite of passage on the way to resilience, I think that's what you've just described. So yeah, just let it happen.
Wise words, Karina. Wise words. Remind Pitta Dominique the next time she comes out trying to control all the shit.
We'll just pull the sound bites out of today and we'll make a montage. Be fine.
I was just thinking, Karina and Dom, if I can just
Yes.
say something there. I think even after the last 2 years or more that we've had, what you were saying about our own practice and holding our own space has been so important, because you can't hold the space of others, really, not safely, if you aren't grounded yourself. And I don't know, that's something that it resonated very much with me, with both of you saying that very much, and trying to find our own practices and what's been important and what's pulled us through as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mara. I'm really enjoying. I enjoy all my conversations with Karina, and yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation. And thank you for offering that. Karina, I was wondering if you could maybe share with us, because look, even though you and I have got an amazing relationship professionally and personally, I still feel like such a neophyte when it comes to yin, because it's not in my practice, it's not in my wheelhouse. And I was wondering if you could talk more to, I know you've touched on it briefly, but if you could talk more about this idea of adjusting in yin. I mean, is it something that even happens really at all, or is it just, as you said earlier, a bit more about offering a prop or offering a variation?
Yeah, sure. And I think the reason that I was able to gather some clear thoughts about it is because I went to a yin class. This was years ago, actually. Could have even been 3 years ago. I went to a yin class. It was incredibly small. I might have been one of 3 students there. And something that I think is worth noting as well is if you're a yoga teacher and you go to a class and you're known, sometimes there can be, it can change the teacher. So if I'm the student but a teacher, and the teacher of the class sees that I'm there, it can sort of change what they were going to do. And something can happen where they think, oh, you're a teacher, you're going to want adjustments. I'm going to assume you want adjustments. I'm going to actually lavish you with a little bit more of my attention because you're a teacher, and whatever else is transpiring psychologically for them. And I went to a yin class, and we're coming into some kind of a forward fold, like a Paschimottanasana / caterpillar type shape. And with the best of intentions, and I knew it was coming from that sort of a place, the teacher came around behind me, and the purpose of yin, or the intention of yin, for those of you that don't practice it, is in a shape like that, you would just be trying to let the natural gravity of the body bring you forward. Of course, there's going to be soft tissue or skeletal things that might come up in the body that might prevent you going further. So then you might change the shape by putting a bolster under the knees, for example, if the structural tissue of the hamstrings was really tense early on, or you might rest your head in your hands if that was too strong down at the sacral area or something like that. But the real purpose is that you're trying to listen carefully to the body at what is starting to feel like a sensation that's too strong, and how that impacts the rest of your body, because we're not trying to be aggressive. We're not trying to loosen the body so much that it becomes destabilized. We're trying to have a little bit of that stress moving through the tissue so that it actually stimulates all the fibroblasts that live in your connective tissue that maintain it. So it's a way of maintaining healthy tissue, but it's that Goldilocks approach, not too much, not too little, depending on what you classify as too much or too little, because my too much might be your too little. Anyway, they came behind me, and they lent their body weight into my back, kind of in a way that you might get in a flow class. But what that did, whilst I could tell that it was sort of coming from a gift place, or I've got something to offer you, this is going to be lovely, it made me go, whoa, now I'm feeling heaps more than I would if you weren't pushing me more forward. I don't know how to navigate this now because this isn't me. This is you and me, and I don't know how to do that with my words to tell you to stop because you're already doing it. But I can't tell where my edge is now. I can't check for myself what feels like too much or too little because you've just changed the game up. Does that make sense? Yeah. The difference might be is if I waved to the teacher and said, hey, I'm not really feeling anything, they might give me a couple of little things I could try to move my body or to add props so that I can feel something. Or if it was too strong, maybe I was pregnant, maybe I had an injury, they might help me find a different way to target the low back or target the legs that wasn't that shape. And it might be helping me move to the wall to try adding the wall. It might be something else. It would be a little bit more conversational. I think an adjustment in yin is more of a, because it's such a slow practice too, like Dominique was saying before, in vinyasa, to get in there and actually touch someone's body and press pause on them while the skipping rope is still going in the rest of the room, that is a lot. And it could be very stressful and it might be not needed. But in a yin class, because you know everyone's going to be in a particular shape for somewhere between a minute to 5 minutes, you could even hang back with that person if they haven't quite workshopped it enough to find value, where everyone will come out of their pose. We always go to a rebound, which is like a shavasana type place, so that that tissue can readjust and you can feel what's just happened to you. So again, you're building awareness of what's just happened in my body. What has what I just done affected me? What information am I garnering about my own body and how I orient myself in this practice? How might I change things differently? So much to listen to. But if someone's coming in there and adding external force, it's going to get confusing and it could be injurious maybe. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
That's amazing, Karina. Thank you. And you've actually just sort of brought a thought up for me that is not specifically related to what you were just talking about, but is tied in there somehow. So if you would indulge me for a moment whilst I put this thought into words. I've come to realize that my teaching unknowingly has actually taken on quite a yin flavor to it. Even though I'm not a yin practitioner, I'm no yin teacher. I've sat in on some of your modules from your yin training, which is just phenomenal. I wouldn't classify myself anywhere, being a yin teacher. Anyway, my point is that I feel like as my teaching and my practice is starting to mature, I am taking on more of these flavors and ideas from the yin tradition, to the point where I actually have introduced rebound postures. And we call them, the royal we, me and my multiple personalities refer to them. I refer to them as rebound shape. So let me give you an example. Ustrasan camel pose has actually been a bit of a cornerstone shape for us in the last 6 weeks in my online groups and in classes, because it's that time of year, sort of late winter, early spring, where it's highly appropriate to start doing a little bit more back bending, moving a little bit more vigorously, going back into the warm rooms under the infrared heaters if you've got access to that, yada, yada, yada. So back to the example. So what we'll do is we'll do Ustrasan, camel pose, but we'll do it 2, or maybe if we're going really well for time, maybe even 3 times. And the first time we do it, we keep the neck out of the shape, just to allow everyone to find that. For me in Ustrasan, I'm really big on finding length and updraft in the back body, rather than sort of thinking of it as folding backwards. So the first round we all do together, even if I've got a sort of gymnast in the group who can stick her head up her posterior, everyone sort of keeps the neck out of the equation, so they have got more access to that, and also holding back on the first shape, because we're treating it like a bit of a warm-up. We're using it as a bit of a diagnostic tool just to see, okay, I may have sort of popped all the way back into Ostrasen yesterday, but today, which is another sort of important theme in teaching. But anyway, so we'll do that one round of Ostrasen, and then we'll come down into the rebound shape, which is Virasana, or hero's pose, where people just sort of sit. And my rule of thumb, more or less, is, let's say we've held Ostrasen for 10 breaths, we'll sit and rebound for 5. And what I've started to notice, and this is bringing it now eventually, thank you, Dominique, this is bringing it back now to this idea of adjusting. What I'll do in studio is I'll use that first round as an opportunity just to look around and see what's happening and how people are moving, how they're breathing, what are their facial expressions like. Then in the second round and maybe the third round, that's when I'll walk around and offer either some verbal instructions on how to dial up the shape, if that's how you're feeling after the first diagnostic sort of round, and offer those hands-on adjustments. And then whilst people are sort of there sitting in Virasana rebounding, again, I think that's giving us a lot of information as well. Sorry, I don't know why I started talking about that, but yeah, I think I might be a closet yin teacher.
Well, here's the thing, like counterposing is a yin idea. And did you know that, well, you probably do know this, like when you learn about yin yoga, you learn that when it was very much one-on-one, it was static posture, shavasana, static posture, shavasana, static posture, shavasana. It wasn't until things became to be seamed together that it had this constant flow. So there's a very yin kind of concept in the origins of learning hatha yoga anyway. And I imagine that was so that you had time to just integrate what you'd just done before you do something else. I'll tell you something that used to come up for me all the time when I practiced flow class is that right at the end, when we would do our closing little mini sequence, we'd come back into halasana. Sorry, we go shoulder stand, dust off my brain, back to halasana. And then when we'd roll down, because my lower back area, all of that deep thoracolumbar fascia had been lengthened so much before we came into fish pose, Matsyasana, my lower back would just ache. And I had a really strong aversion to fish pose because it would take my back into extension straight away. So I'd always skip it. And I'd have my feet wide, my knees knocked together, because what my back needed was a rebound. And now I've come to understand through all of my learning and grasping for information after that tissue actually needed to rest before I did anything else with it. Whereas I just thought, oh, gee, I've got a really tight lower back. Something's wrong with me. Why does this always hurt? That's actually a natural, healthy feeling of that thoracolumbar fascia that's just been pulled and lengthened and stressed to rebound. And that's a really common thing for people.
It's interesting also to note that all of the newest research, this is new information to me. I should rephrase that. But I'm only just learning in the last 1 or 2 years that so much of the ability of our nervous systems to be plastic, so that neuroplasticity, our ability to learn new skills, is dependent entirely, get this, dependent entirely on periods of intense, and I'm trying to recall this without making a mess of it, periods of intense struggle or intense work or intense discomfort or intense pressure, followed by short bursts of relaxation.
I love that.
And but this is the neuroscience of it. If you actually want to be learning and growing and developing and holding on to these new skills, in regardless what field it is, whether it's a new asana or a new language or a new my son's really into weight training at the moment, or a new barbell size or whatever it is. Can tell I don't do a lot of weight training. Maybe I should.
You have to rest.
You have to rest. You have to rebound, and you have to rebound. And it's in that rebounding that the rest and the plasticity and the resilience and all of that actually gets metabolized and soaked in and owned, and whatever other sort of synonyms you want to throw in there.
Integrated, it sounds like.
Well, exactly.
You can't learn anything new until it's been digested.
Well, exactly. You've got to digest it and absorb all of those beautiful nutrients, and then you're ready for the next meal. And now I'm getting hungry. But it's to me, especially with my very specific mindset, that was just a revelation, because I'm like, well, as if you don't how do you eat a whale? Well, as if I'm not taking the next bite right now. I haven't even swallowed this bite, let alone digested it or metabolized any of the nutrients, but I'm just chomping my way through this whale. And it's a revelation to realize that it's not only okay to let your students have opportunities in the class to rebound and to assimilate, but it's actually really important.
Yeah, it's a revelation and it's a revolution. When I teach people about rebound, I say, by resting in between each of the shapes, it's not just about your physical tissues. You're actually reminding yourself how important it is to pause after you do some big project and feel how it's impacted you before you then jump into the next thing, because we're all serial, course junkies and training junkies and book junkies. When do we actually stop, mentally and physically? How do we even do that? Do we even have the skills to do that? And now science is backing it up.
Larry the greyhound in the background there having a shake by the sounds of it.
He's had his 6-hour nap now. He's probably going to start giving me the hustle. So that it has huge psychological ripple effects. Whenever you do a rebound, you are having a revolution against the yang, fast-paced, kind of masculine flavored way that we've all been taught to be extremely productive in our lives, and that productivity equals our worth. For you to just pause and reflect and not even really think, but just feel and take a pause is incredible. And
even just to reframe, if that yang sort of flavor or orientation is something that is really important to you, how wonderful to realize that, actually, if I want to be even more productive, if I want to be even more yang in my yanginess, then it will only behoove me. I've always wanted to use that word in a sentence, and now I have. Then it will only behoove us to stop and to rebound and to have that chance to metabolize. It's actually only going to help you progress in a more grounded, in a very real way. And it actually, you could paint it from that very yang perspective, because I kind of need to do that psychologically to encourage myself. And it's actually, again, it's been a revelation, because I've been working smarter, not harder, and progressing in so many different areas much more steadily, and in a much more real way, because I've got true ownership and true absorption of that. So it's a revolution. It's a revelation.
Yeah, and all yang which is action, force, movement, power, all of that has to have a fuel source. And rest is where we build in. You know, in Chinese medicine, if people can drink all the herbs and come regularly for their acupuncture, it's chasing flies. But if they're not actually getting good sleep, none of that's really going to make a dent. So yeah, these little moments of rest is actually where we fill up the tank.
Yeah.
Next asana, or for the next project, or for the next day.
Or it's all just hot air and moving around, and it doesn't mean anything. It's disembodied hot air.
Disembodied hot air.
I'm looking at myself as I say that. Disembodied hot air, Dominique. Really, and I know, again, like I know that you know, I know that you know that, you know, this is a big part of my journey and my learning, is sort of actually realizing that that's just all empty bluster. If you don't have the water and the earth, if you don't have some roots and some something material to anchor it, to give it form, to give you agency and like motility in the world, then it's just hot air and bluster. But
got to have the yin and the yang. You've got to have both.
it's beautiful.
Because it feels like a good place to.
Yeah, I think this is a good place. Mara, how are you traveling over there in Port Douglas?
Very well, and fascinating. I've loved it. I've loved listening. It's been really, really good. So much to think about, and that's what I'll be doing as I spend a little bit of time this afternoon, perhaps in the sun.
Amazing.
So thank you very much to both of you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mara. It's really lovely to reconnect with you, and I'm glad to hear that you are having a nice rest there in the sun. And to those of you who are listening to this discussion after the fact, thank you for your company.
Yes, thank you, Mara, for joining us. What a nice little, trio of dips we were today. And
Thanks,
yes, we hope that this provides food for thought, that it resonates with you, that you ask questions of yourself, that you challenge the conversation as well. And yeah, you let it feed into the choices that you make. And we look forward to seeing you somewhere soon, online or in person. We've got lots of things coming up, and yeah, we're really enjoying what we're doing. So we'll let you know when we're doing more stuff, I think.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Karina. Thanks again, Mara. Thanks to you all. We'll connect with you again.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.